You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Men do not menstruate.
Some women have penises, right? Some men have vaginas.
Oh man, you don't want a grandkid? No problem. Oh man, well dude, you're a weak man, dude.
LGBTQIA+++, and then we included men who dress up like women and mock women, like influencer Dylan Mulvaney.
Everything Manly Podcast is a place where men can come to be taught and encouraged to think and act like men in a world where men are being feminized. Jon and Tommy are two men who want to encourage men how to think and act in a feminized world. Hey everybody, welcome to the Everything Manly Podcast. I think we are on season 2, episode 10.
It's coming together.
It is.
It's been a while.
It has, but someone busy as you are, Jon, I'm just glad to get you in the studio when I can. So.
Oh man, come on.
Yeah, man, you're getting it done though. You're getting it done. So what I want to do today is to slow down enough to hopefully not make everybody angry at us today. But I guess I really don't care, but I really do care when people begin to think about stuff rightly. And so that's why we're here today. And so Jon and I, we're going to be talking about DOGE.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about some of what they're finding. Once again, you could spend time researching this and discussing this until you're blue in the face. And Jon and I neither have the time to do intensive research, but right. We're just simply conveying what we've seen, and we want to give you our perspective on it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, it's actually been good that there's been a pause, because you and I had talked about when this all came out, just a few months ago, we were like, man, we ought to talk about this and how it relates to men and just our conversations with our family, because it was the talk of the nation, really, this movement to find fraud and waste. But actually, I think pausing has been good, because now we've had time to kind of see a little bit about how this thing is going to proceed. And maybe we can kind of take a deep breath and realize It's not the end of the world,
And I think some of the hesitancy behind some people was, well, who are these people?
Right.
It's like the curtain with Oz, right? Yep. Who is the person behind the curtain, right?
Sure.
What are these people doing? Who are they?
Yeah.
And last night I watched about 35-minute video of maybe 9 people working with DOGE. Yeah. And they range from ex-CEO Morgan Stanley Chase, co-chairman of Airbnb, co-founder of Airbnb, a businessman in Austin who runs 5 businesses, a retired rocket scientist. So these are men who are not only competent, but they are currently working in the business private sector and doing well.
Right.
I mean, everybody's heard of Airbnb, Morgan Stanley Chase. So, I mean, these aren't some small fish. These are men who have proven themselves in the private sector.
Right.
So for me, when I watched that last night, I said at minimum, Elon and Trump, they're surrounding themselves, even if you disagree with these guys, men who know what they're doing. Right. It's not like you're grabbing old Smojo off the street because he's your buddy. These are men who are tried and true. So what I want us to do is just to slow down enough to breathe and to realize, okay, even if you disagree and you're not a Republican, I want you to take time just to breathe just a moment and ask yourself just a few questions practically on a personal level. Do you like somebody robbing from you?
Right.
And if someone is robbing from your personal checking account or your family's checking account or savings account, would you want to know? And then if you find that out, would you want to know who that person was, and would you want to stop the bleeding, the financial bleeding? And I don't think anyone would say no to that.
Sure.
I would think they say yes.
And that's kind of one of the things that you and I have talked about, is that of all the things that will happen in the next 4 years,
yeah,
this is one of these things we should probably be bipartisan about. You know, that you would think.
Why not?
Yeah. I mean, there can be disagreements about maybe methodology or something, but the idea of trying to find waste and fraud when we're already trillions of dollars,
$36 trillion
in debt. I mean, which is just, you know, we really can't comprehend, I'm sure.
It's a big number.
What that means. You know, the idea of trying to find some ways to help, I don't see where that's a bad thing. And unless the people that are getting exposed are part of the fraud.
Sure.
Which is a good probability, right?
Yeah, I mean,
which is why they're squealing.
Yeah, I don't know much about Stacey Abrams, but I do know that her account went from zero to something. It was either $2 million or $2 billion. It was a big amount of money.
Right.
And so I can't help but scratch my head on that and go, okay, why did she receive that money, and where did the money go?
Right.
And
well, it's like in every politician, right?
Yeah.
They get elected with, you know, bare funds, minimum funds, and then they leave millionaires many times over. You know, how does that happen in public service?
Yeah.
Somebody's getting some stuff kicked back, you know.
There has to be. And just because, and Jon, I'm just like you. When I hear the number 36 trillion, that number is so big, I will never make that in 50 lifetimes. Right. If I could live 50 lives, but I can't.
Right. Yeah, right.
But you get the point. But just because that number is so big does not mean that we should not actively attack that and try to get it down.
Right.
And so when we have someone that says, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to surround myself with people who are efficient at their trade,
right,
and who know how to run businesses, and we're going to cut the deficit by, I think they started off with $2 trillion, but now they're going to cut the deficit by $1 trillion. Who in the world would say that's bad?
Right.
And I think people need to push aside as best they can, because listen, I know people have their political views and I know they have their ance.
Sure.
But just like you said, this should be the biggest bipartisan issue ever.
Yeah.
Because you, the American taxpayer, are being robbed of your money. Your money is being mishandled. Yeah. Your money is being misused.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want that to stop?
I mean, you think about how many times, you know, do you hear things like, well, the government should be helping, and then fill in the blank with some societal thing, right? Whatever it is, some social issue, you know, whatever. If nothing else, even from that perspective, anything that we save that they're trying to find these areas of savings in, I mean, it helps to fund the very things that you claim you want the government to do that actually probably could improve somebody's life.
Yes.
Versus some of these foolish things that I know you and I have talked about before.
Yes.
Where you start seeing where they've cut, you know, ridiculous funding for foreign nations to teach, you know, transgender chimpanzees or something. You know, like that's just doesn't make any sense. It's like, why not take the money, if that's your perspective, use it to help the needs of the American people, right? Help somebody's life better.
Yeah, like gambling.
Like, if that's what you're going to do, then at least spend it in those ways.
$5 million for gambling addictions on chimpanzees.
Right. Yeah, I'm just, you know, and of course I made that up. That's not a real thing. But I'm just saying.
No, I think that is a real thing.
You know, I've seen so many crazy ideas. I don't even know what's fake anymore. Now
you know?
they're so foolish that you just, you know,
yes.
when they got exposed. So I just am saying, I look at it and say, if I was on either side of the political aisle, assuming there's two sides, I don't see where you really can have too big of a fight about this, other than you don't like the personalities involved.
Yeah.
But the end result seems to be a benefit, a win for the American people.
Yeah, because there's so much fraud taking place. And when Elon Musk spoke about this, I mean, this is clearly fraud. And he said, one thing he said last night that I thought was just, it makes complete sense. So the Treasury Department's computer system does not talk to the Social Security Department's computer system. Therefore, you have, I think the oldest person we have alive in America now is 114 and 115. But as of right now, you have hundreds of thousands of people receiving benefits that are over 115 years old. And 40% of the calls that the IRS gets, the Treasury Department gets, is for people to have their address and their checks that are being funded to them, their address and their banking accounts changed. 40% of the calls.
Yeah.
And it's hard for the IRS to sniff out what's a fraudster, what's a fake. So a lot of this stuff is going through, and I think they said last night, $330 million are being given out to people who are over 115 years old.
There's hope, man. There's hope. You know, we got to wait. We can make our money.
You know, so in actuality, we know that there's no one that old.
Yeah.
Living at all, but yet there's being $330 million given out, and people who are fraudsters are taking advantage of this
the system.
and exploiting the system and getting that money. So let's say, for example, you and I, we started a business, and in that joint account, we had worked enough to have $330 million in that account. Now, we took a pause, like a 4 or 5 month pause. We come back to start our business afresh the next year, and we come back and that account is drained. There's nothing left.
Yeah.
You and I would be pissed.
We're going to find out who took the money.
We're going to find out who took the money.
Right.
And so let's say this. Let's say that number is $330 million. We can't chase down the fraudsters, but we can stop it from here on out.
Sure.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know anyone in their right mind who say that was a bad thing. So, and we talked about this on our season 1, episode 6, the importance of men speaking truth and living lives that exemplify the truth.
Yeah.
And so any man, I don't care who you are, whether you're Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, or other,
Right.
when you see someone stealing from innocent people, when you see someone lying about who they are and who they're not, that should make you angry. And that should make you want to see a difference, want to see a change, want to see that changed.
Yeah.
And it would be okay if it was just that $330 million. We go, okay, we can get through that. But it's not that. Now it's loans being given out to 9 months old, small business loans. And it's the transgender chimpanzees, and it's the Sesame Street in Iran and Iraq. These things, this is what I think DOGE is doing.
Right.
That if we just took time to slow down a bit and to look at it, to go, why wouldn't you want this to stop?
Yeah.
So,
and I think, part of that we discussed in previous episodes as well was the idea that for most men, there's like this innate thing where you want to be a protector.
Sure.
And I think part of that comes into this where you look at it not only from the broader perspective of the country, but even down to your community and your family and say, surely that should be something that motivates us too, to say, I want to take care of those that are under my reach, in my circle of influence. And I think that's kind of where I think as men, we can evaluate these things that are going on in our country and say, whether I like this person or that person or not, I can definitely respect the effort because it probably will help, down the road, protect those who are being taken advantage of. And so I think that's one reason why, even though this is kind of just a flashpoint, and besides, we're only, 3 months into this thing.
3 months, yeah.
Right? So you're 3 months in, and you've got some people that are complaining that it's not enough in 3 months. And I'm like, the fact that anything is found in 3 months in the government's amazing.
Because we know how slow it moves.
Yeah, so the fact that this is moving at like light speed,
I've got a friend who's getting a green card right now. It could take up to 2 years for him to do this process.
So, I look at this and I'm thinking, okay, well, from just a perspective of just as the guy of saying, you know what, it takes some courage to do this. It takes some boldness to do this. And you got to figure, you got a guy like Trump who has nothing at this point to lose.
Yeah.
So he's going out with a bang, but he's also doing what he said he was going to do. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why there's a shock about this, because these are kind of promises he talked about
on the campaign.
He was always talking about this stuff. Whether you like Musk or not, at the end of the day, the dude is smart, and he's not going to be able to go anywhere higher than he is right now. Like he's not going to be president. He can't be president, because whatever his background, his nationality. But here's the thing: he wasn't born here. But it's like he's kind of hooked at the hip with Trump now. You know what I mean? So you got these two guys that are like they don't have anything to lose political capital with. Mm-hmm. But what happens in the next 4 years will definitely shape their lives too. Because you know, if you're a guy like Musk, do you want everybody mad at you? Probably not. Sure. But at the same time, I think he understands the importance of this task. And so I can admire what I'm saying is even if it was on the other side of the aisle, and I don't know who that person would be. Sure. But if it was another, you know, political, you know, president, another person, and they were doing these same kind of things, I'm just saying I would look at that and go, man, that takes a lot of courage.
I would hope I could say that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, man, that's pretty bold that you're willing to do that, you know, that at great risk to your potential future earnings and whatever else, you know. And
not only does it take courage, but as I looked at that small panel of these DOGE guys last night, all these men are very busy businessmen, right? And they have nothing to gain from this,
right? That's what I mean. Yeah, it's like
and so there has to be a component of just caring,
right,
about the American people and how their money is being spent. And for me, I have to respect that because as a man, I not only want to care about my family, I want to care about my fellow man around me.
Sure.
You know, the other day I had a older woman disagree with me, and you know, I was doing some ministry stuff, and you know, I actually asked her a question. It's like, ma'am, I said, why are you so angry right now? You know, I care for you. Yeah. I don't hate you. I actually love you, and this is why I'm here. And you know, she couldn't hear it at that moment, but as men, we need to be willing not only to look for competent people to fill positions, but we need to look for people who actually care about others.
Yeah.
And that's a principle that we talked about integrity in season 1, verse 8, episode 8. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, and then we also talked about perseverance and discipline here in season 2, episode 9, which is their last episode.
Yeah. Like doing hard things, you know, that's what we were talking about. You know, this is an example,
sure,
like a real life example of that.
I mean, people are burning down his dealerships, not burning the dealerships completely down, but
attacking,
firebombing these cars, shooting into the dealerships. I mean, and he knew that this was going to be the implications of what he was seeking to do, but yet he still did it because he truly does think that, man, if we don't get our debt under control, you know, how are we going to continue to flourish as a country? We can't.
And then everybody's affected. I mean,
sure.
Even worse, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be even worse.
That ball's rolling downhill, brother.
Yeah.
We got to stop it.
You know, one of the things that when this first started happening, and I think you and I were talking about this before, was that, you know, they were saying, I began to, you know, see some blurbs on either articles I read or just news interviews that I witnessed on, you know, it's like mainstream TV stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, these kind of policies have been in effect by all these previous administrations. They're like, you know, all the way back to Clinton, you know, like Clinton did this, Obama did this, you know, Biden, whatever.
Yeah.
And the whole point of their content was to say, hey, this is a slam against Trump. Like he's just piggybacking off their stuff. But I'm thinking, I lived through all those administrations, and I don't remember anything like this happening. So I don't know what I'm missing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't have some name it something else kind of thing they were trying to do. I've never seen any administration out of all those years
actually do it,
you know. And so in one sense, I'm kind of just impressed that somebody said in just a few months, like, hey, we start in January, we're just going to do some hard stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can respect that.
And I think when you say do it, I mean, what you mean is actually lift the hood of the Treasury Department, lift the hood of the Social Security Department, and look at all these agencies.
Yeah. And one of the things, too, was like, and I think we were talking about this off the air, but the one thing that I do kind of wrestle with, and that I don't have any knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, you know, how they choose and
none
pick
of us do.
But I mean, you know, there obviously are people's lives that are affected by some of these choices. You know, and so in some sense, I know there are real people in real time that may get a call that says, "Hey, your job's being cut," you know, or this position no longer, or this department is gone. And I'm honest, man. I'll be honest, tell you, like I get it. That would be something you got to process and figure out, you know. And I don't know how that stuff's handled. I don't know who calls who, or you know, we just hear the extreme versions of it, right? And so I realize there's real people affected by this too. And so as a guy, I mean, I would want to be concerned about those people in my community. You know,
Sure.
where we live at, there's not government workers, right? There's
Yeah.
no federal workers. But if you lived in, Virginia or D.C. or something, I mean, clearly some lives would be disrupted. So
Well,
I think that's a real thing we got to deal with too.
When it hit home for me, when this topic that we're discussing right now hit home for me, it was in my care group at my church because some of them work for the government.
Yeah.
And some of their family members work for the government.
Right.
And they were saying, hey, they got that nasty letter that, hey, what were 5 things you did this week? And some were so offended
Yeah.
by receiving that letter. Other people were saying, like, I don't know what to say. And I asked the person sitting to my right who worked for the government, I said, well, can you name 5 things you did?
Yeah,
and
right.
she listed off like 4. I said, well, you've already listed 4 in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I said, you don't have one more to go, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so if you are a worker and you actually do work, then listing all 5 things that you did
be an
should not
issue.
be very hard.
Yeah.
But at the same sense, I do think that people losing their job, that's never a good thing. That's always a bad thing. But if you have been doing a job, been hired for a job, and the government has hired you and not thought about the waste in which how they're spending your money or hired you on, then that's not your fault.
Right.
That's the government's fault and how it's
Right.
been run. And so you should not be, even if you lose your job, you should be able to find a job because you didn't lose your job because you were incompetent.
Right.
You lost your job because of mismanagement.
Yeah. And I think, too, part of that, and it just is, I've been thinking through it as we've been discussing this for a few weeks now, but
Yeah.
I think that if it was in a private sector business, you stand a chance to lose your job anyway. I
Sure.
mean, there's no guarantees that
None.
next month's the same as this month. And so I think everybody that is employed would realize, like, I've got to be competent at what I do, but at any particular time, there's no promise for employment in the future. And I think one of the distinctions, is in the private sector, that's sort of an understood thing.
It's kind of like an unwritten rule, like you could get axed at any time.
Yeah, but I mean, you're just kind of like, you're not like living on pins and needles, but
Yeah.
you're like, I'm also expendable. But I think part of what's going on in the federal system seems to be that there's an expectation that this is a job that can never go away, I can never lose. And honestly, I get it. That's why some people play that system. Not saying they're not doing their job, but like,
Sure.
yeah, why not jump into the federal system? Maybe I get some good benefits,
Yeah.
and I got some things for my family that will be beneficial in the future, assuming I'll never lose a job because the government's never going to stop. And now we're seeing, like in a private business, if you're not doing well or one of these CEOs comes in and goes, we're just going to cut this whole division, then you go, well, I mean, what am I going to say? It's that man's money. This is different because it's our money. You know what I mean? It's the American people's money. And so when these divisions are getting cut, it's to the benefit of the American people.
Amen.
And so I can kind of see both sides of it where
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sympathetic in the sense that, man, I don't want anybody to lose their job.
Yeah.
Nobody does, I wouldn't think. But at the same time, I realize if you were working in a different situation, it's very possible that could have happened anyway. Yeah. So,
And just echoing what you said, I mean, my mother, she worked for a state government for 20 years. And she got a disability retirement, I think, at 18. I mean, I've known people that worked in my small town where I grew up, worked for the highway department for 20 years, retired, and got another job where they can make a certain amount of money and
still get their stuff,
still get their pension. So not a bad thing, but if the government has been misusing the American people's money once again, that's not your problem. If you've been a hard worker, then you should still be able to go out and find work elsewhere. I'll be sad for you that you. I mean, especially those, and here we are just looking at all these implications. I mean, someone who's been working for the government for 15 years, and now they lost their job. I mean, that's not easy. I mean, they were 5 years from getting their benefits.
Sure. And I mean, I've had people like that I've known, work, in either local municipalities or whatever else. And I get it. I mean, there's an advantage to it. There's good reasons for that. But again, I think maybe as men, how we would kind of handle that if somebody's listening to this and it's in their community or somebody like you're talking about, your small group that's close to you.
Yeah.
Then I think, being perceptive to people's needs, being a man who's like, hey, I've been allowed to have a few extra resources I can help right now with your family or something.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are all appropriate ways we could respond to that as men, if that was a direct issue we were facing, to say, you talk to your wife, and go, hey, our next door neighbors, really, this is a big hit for them right now. Let's go get them some groceries or, whatever, until things settle out. Like, I think that's just being a good neighbor, being common courtesy, being a man who's aware, self-aware, but also aware of his surroundings, and knows when people have need. I think those are all things we can build on as men.
I think that's great stuff. I mean, because you put a boat in the water and you cut on the motor, there's going to be a wake.
Yeah.
And so these decisions that are being made, I think the decisions need to be made.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
We don't need pansies for men, right? We need real men, but at the same time, we need to realize that this is going to affect a lot of people. And what I keep telling myself is as these decisions are made, it's not going to make things easier right now. I think it's probably going to make things a little bit worse because people now have to go find other jobs. They have to go other places. Although what was said last night, Elon said there have been very few people, and I don't know if this is true, but he says not even 1% of the government's employees have been laid off.
Right.
It's been below like 0.5 of 1%.
Yeah. And I think some of that's been absorbed, like this department's down, but you're going to shift to other places. I think that's probably a lot of what's practically happening.
Yeah. I think they were saying that there were 1,400 people responsible at the IRS for buying cell phones and computers for people. And one of the businessmen said, you could take one person, and it would take them 30 days, and they could have everybody furnished with computers and cell phones. Why do we have 14 people? We pay them 365 days a year for something one person could do in 30 days.
But that's the difference in the private sector,
exactly,
and the government bureaucracy.
Exactly. So,
and I mean, I'll just throw in there too. I mean,
please do.
I know we don't want to beat this thing to death, but honestly, man,
let's beat it, man.
Sometimes getting fired is the best thing could ever happen to you. I know, I've been fired before, man. And you get hurt, and you lick your wounds, and you realize the sun still comes up tomorrow, man.
Yes.
And the bills still come in.
Yes.
And so part of being a man is going, all right, I got to figure this out, and sometimes it's because of something that you did, or it's because of something you had no control over. But either way, life moves on. And I think so. Part of that is, as a guy, if you're in this situation, you go, all right, I can't sit here forever and huddle up in the fetal position, man. I gotta figure out a way to
move on,
to move forward, and so I think that's something that men ought to excel at.
And that comes back to season 2, episode 9, with perseverance and discipline.
Yeah,
man,
that's right.
Let's roll, man. Come on, it's time to get up.
I mean, sometimes hard things come. You just gotta deal with it.
And let's just be honest. I'm just going to be frankly blunt and honest, and I'm going to try to word this as gently as I can.
Yeah, because I'm in the room.
I don't care about
don't
you,
hurt
John.
my feelings, man. I'm sensitive.
So if you're working with our government, whether that be federal or local, if you're doing a job.
Sure.
You know if you're working, if you're really needed, and if you're just biding your time.
Right.
If you're just goofing off or
Right.
pushing papers or looking busy, but really you're not needed.
Yeah.
You know that. And if that's the case, then you needed to leave.
You're not being surprised by this.
Yeah. You need to leave a long time ago.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, what's the value proposition? Right. What value am I bringing to this enterprise?
Am I actually bringing value to this company, to this branch of government, to this business that I'm? Yeah. You need to ask yourself that question. So,
but even after everything we said, I still am convinced that if this was the same thing happening from a different administration, I think I'd have to be supportive of that.
Why wouldn't we?
I'm just saying, man. Like I would look at it and go, man, that's a challenge, but I get you. I see what you're doing,
Because it's saving our country financially. Yeah. It's saving the American people money. I would hope.
So one more thought.
Please.
So what happens if they translate this down to the state level? What do you think about the proposition that, man, what if like North Carolina decided, and I think there's been some rumblings about, let's do our own like mini DOGE, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine if like 50 states, counting Canada 51, if we had all of them, And they said, you know what we're going to do? We're just all going to go and start cutting fraud within every state.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? Man, it could be a revolution, man.
It would not be just a federal revolution. It would be a statewide revolution.
Yeah, and again, I just don't think it's that foreign of an idea. Like, why would you not? Why would you not look at this model and say a state like North Carolina with, you know, tens of millions of people, we're a very populated state compared to some of these bigger property states. But we got a lot of people in this state, man. You know, like, what would you not say? Man, what if we could knock out a couple of $1 billion along the way, like, and every state pitching in? Like, it'd be crazy.
Like, I was at Rocky Mount at the volleyball tournament that our girls played at.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that facility.
Sure.
And I was like, Melanie, who paid for this?
Right.
Who paid for this facility? Because I know Rocky Mount, the Tarboro area, the rich and the elite don't live there.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying there aren't some rich people that don't live there, but I'm just being honest, being practical.
Sure.
Because I used to own a rental property there. I know the people there, love the people, hardworking. Most of them very hardworking people.
Right.
I mean, it's got its spots where there's, and every city's got it. But I began to look at it, and Melanie's like, I don't know. I said, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
So I looked it up, and the city went into an enormous amount of debt to pay for
To
this
do
thing.
that. Yeah.
And they have not cleared black since they built that place.
That's why the parking was so expensive.
Oh, okay, we started on the parking, man.
That's why you had to pay all that money to park.
You know, had the beautiful asphalt driveways and all these places you could park, but they had us coned off and parking in mud parking lots. But anyway, I mean, so I sat back and I thought about it. I said, sir, they got an electricity bill. They're paying all these people behind the counter.
What a dad move, man.
You know?
Just sitting back being the dad, looking around. If we sold a hot dog to every person here, how much money would we make? You know?
But then I roughly counted the heads of people, how many cars. They were probably going to make around, I can't say clear because they hadn't made a profit yet since they built the place. And I hope they eventually do get to make a profit.
Sure.
But they were going to make about $500,000 when I use make loosely because they had to pay all the overhead and of course the payment for the building and I'm not doing that just to pick on Rocky Mount, but I'm just doing that to say that we need people in position of government that make wise decisions. Yeah. And I would just simply say if I was living in Rocky Mount and I had any say at the Chamber of Commerce, is this the wisest thing to do for our city? Maybe it will be. Maybe within another 3 to 4 years, they'll turn things around. They'll begin to make a profit, and more people will begin coming into the city and investing. I know DMV moved their headquarters there, so that's a good thing. But anyway, so yeah, if this is done on a state level, hey, praise the Lord. You know?
I mean, I was just thinking. I mean, you know, if you think about because the issue would be when all this is said and done is will they admit it was a success?
Yeah.
Or will it just go down as, you know, it was Trump's idea, it was a horrible plan or whatever. But I got to imagine if we go at the pace that we're at now and they just keep, I mean, there's going to be plenty to do for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. You would have to imagine you get to the end of this and say, at whatever level, it had to have been a success, right? I mean, if you saved $1 million, it's a success in my mind.
Sure.
But of course, by the end of this thing, they'll save $1 trillion or whatever, you know, at least on paper.
Yeah.
And then you got to go, well, if that's such a success, why would you not want to translate those kind of efficiency things to the next level?
Yeah.
You know, and then you take, you know, these really populous states, you know, you take California's and the New Yorks and the places like this and the Floridas and you know, go, man, what if we saved X amount of dollars, you know, because half the federal money is going to those states. You know, I mean, that's the end result is that the states are playing that game of like, we're only going to spend whatever we have to. It's like a matching on your 401k, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to give me $10 billion, I'm only going to spend 10 to match, you know, I mean, but if the state was having to ante up a little bit more and the feds were not, you know, I mean, I just think to me, the more control that stays with the states, the better.
Sure.
You know, our country is so diverse in the regions.
Yeah.
You know, let the state rule like it wants, and if you don't like it, move to another.
Move to another state.
You know, and until the feds that do a little bit of national protection, follow some constitutional stuff, and stay out of my life.
Keep me safe.
Yeah, just
let me do my thing.
Yeah, just do your thing, man. Keep an army going, and other than that, I'm good. Keep the military strong. You know,
and that's a. This may be another podcast, but we're not going to do the political thing. Not every time. It's not worth it. We got other issues we need to talk about. But So DOGE can find all this fraud, all this wasteful spending, and we can move forward. But if Congress
that's going to be the next step, right?
doesn't act on this, then how's it ever really going to be a substantial long-term change?
Sure.
Because if the people in the Senate and the House are getting their palms greased, what's going to motivate them to pass laws to really change these outfits and really change these agencies? So, I guess time will tell.
Well, I guess we got midterm elections coming up in 2 years, right?
Yep.
Whatever. So,
Yep.
if it's working, then everybody's going to ride the coattails of this thing and say, you need to vote for me because I'm for it, right?
for so and so.
But if DOGE and its effects doesn't seem to be good, then
everybody's gonna ban the shit.
Everybody's gonna be like, every Republican's like, I didn't like it to start with, and you're gonna see pragmatism at its
through
finest.
and through. There it is.
But I mean, that's how
politics,
you
right?
give it 24 months, and you're gonna see. Really, just give it 12.
Yeah.
And they'll be campaigning, and you're gonna see. You'll kind of get a feel for the nation of how they really feel. Because right now, I think people are upset because stock market stuff and people,
that's just going to happen.
And that's short term stuff. I feel like, but I'm no economist, but
I'm not either.
I'm just saying, like, I think that's short term.
Yeah.
All the volatility, but
seed is a good time to buy if you want to invest.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
But I think everybody's just kind of uncertain about the markets and the tariff stuff and whatever. But I still think that you shouldn't let fear take over principles, right?
Yes.
I just think that's a practical thing in life. Like, you can't live your life in fear. You got to have principles. And if your principle is let's be fiscally conservative, let's guard the people's money, let's be good stewards of what the nation already has. I just don't see how you can be but so much against it. I don't fault somebody for having pause and say, let's just check this out. But just being anti and burning up your Tesla truck, that's just dumb. That's
so stupid. How much did you pay for that thing?
Yeah, that's crazy. So
I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Like, why are you buying that again?
Yeah. So that's another thing.
Yeah. So just in close,
yeah.
Men, we should be people of truth, men of truth, people of truth. We should be people of integrity, people who have discipline and perseverance, and all these things put together here in our government and what's being done here. I'm not saying all these people are poster children of integrity, poster children of perseverance and discipline, and poster children of truth, but what they're seeking to do, I think, have these seeds of these attributes there.
Sure.
And if you would just slow down just a bit to get out of your party line and just to realize what these people are seeking to do, it's going to help our country.
Yes, thinking beyond yourself.
Just thinking beyond yourself, thinking beyond your party lines. And I would hope that if there's a libertarian or a no-name party that came to power doing these things, I could go, hey, way to go. Thanks for saving me money. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can leave that to my kids.
That's right, 100%. Yeah.
But I think the way you said it is, you said it well. Let the government do their thing. Let the state, if you don't like what's going on in your state, move to another state. Let the federal government protect us and let us do what we want to do.
Yep.
You know, like we can be Christians and we can live by moral standards found in the Bible, and I'm very glad for that.
100%, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we're going to end it there.
Yep.
As I said earlier, go out and be a man because your culture needs you to be a man, and don't be a pansy.
That's
and
right.
tune in next time.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, man. See ya.